first thing we do is pay tribute to Jack Skellington. Pumpkin King, God of Halloween. Welcome to Video Game Vision Quest. This is a video about a subject I've been fascinated with for a very long time, specifically regarding the application of chaos magic, ritual magic, to modern Halloween. Now, if you're not already an expert in ritual magic, chaos magic, and the entire Western esoteric tradition, plus Buddha and schools of thought like that, pause the video, become an expert right now. Okay, welcome back. I'm going to assume you're now an expert in all these subjects, and we can begin. Now, the main thrust of this video regards an ancient discussion thread from a site called Barbelith.com. Now, Barbelith.com is a site that was inspired by a comic called The Invisibles. The Invisibles was one of the big inspirations for The Matrix, specifically regarding the subject of people escaping from the reality they're contained in into a higher dimensional reality. The Invisibles were all about escaping from their comics. There is a whole lot of weird, fascinating thought included in the comics and inspired by the comics. And most of that coalesced around Barbelith.com, which became the official, unofficial site for The Invisibles. They covered a whole lot of subjects there. Really, the entire site is worth going to. But this video is about a series of threads there regarding Halloween magic, black magic, orange magic, that really is one of the most fascinating magical texts I've ever read. They go to a lot of weird places with it. Now, what this is not is a video about Samhain and the ancient mysteries of Halloween. Not that those aren't completely fascinating, because they really are. There is a lot of amazing, fascinating stuff regarding the Samhain tradition, going all the way back to ancient Celtic times. A lot of very Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings style stuff happened in ancient Halloween, ancient Samhain. Check out this picture right here. This is part of your ancient Halloween history. I'm just going to let you check that out with no context for a second. Happy Halloween. Check this. And here's a smidge of context. The hero Fionn fighting Aelin, who is said to have burned Tara each Samhain. Ancient Samhain was Lord of the Rings like crazy. So I definitely recommend looking it up and incorporating it into your groovy Halloween practices, because it's just fascinating. But that is not what this video is about. You will find many other people who are far better at telling you about Samhain than me. This is about the application of magic to modern Halloween. The Halloween that's about carving jack-o'-lanterns, getting candy, dressing up in crazy costumes, going to crazy costume parties, running around with your friends, having weird adventures, trying to find ghosts, watching horror movies, getting weird. The modern Halloween, that's what this is a video about, because while, the original Samhain and all the old religions are very, very full of cool stuff, there's a lot to be said about our modern traditions too, just because it's the funnest Halloween, the funnest holiday of the year. Well, I mean, we could debate Christmas versus Halloween for a long time, but Halloween's pretty amazing and really keeps getting bigger every year. I love carving pumpkins, for example. Since I was a little kid, I always thought of this as kind of like creating a golem or an egregore or a spirit servitor. even before I knew what those words were, just taking this living pumpkin from the earth and carving a crazy face in it meant to scare away evil spirits and ghosts and ghouls and unruly teenagers and vampires getting smashed in defense of our homes. It's basically spirit servitor creation or golem creation that everyone does, but not really thinking of it as full-blown magic, just sort of a casual, everyday kind of thing. And that is what this crazy thread was about. Let me just read from this opening here. This year, starting to explore the idea of invoking Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, from the Tim Burton movie Nightmare Before Christmas, as a god form. His blend of spooky, tricksy prowess and wide-eyed innocence and enthusiasm form a nice kind of trickster-fool complex, and the plot of the movie outlines Jack's mostly metaphorical death and rebirth cycle. Think along those same lines, I'm also playing with association between the four elements, for my purposes, air, earth, fire, and water, the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, and the cardinal monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and the Mummy. This is so much rich and varied. There is so much rich and varied imagery associated with Halloween that everything seems to be falling into place nicely. Early experiments suggest that it's also pretty effective. For me, at least. So I'm wondering, do any other lithers, that Barbelithers, have any Halloween traditions or Halloween-based magical practices? Not pagan Samhain celebrations. The bright orange screaming pumpkin trick-or-treating Halloween. This is Chiropteron, who, when this post was originally posted, was going by Lepidopteron, I believe. So you'll see it signed L a lot, but in these screenshots, you'll see Chiropteron. Anyways, this is the start of the Halloween thread, and the main thrust of these threads is this guy's ongoing experiences working with, invoking, and evoking Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, from the Nightmare Before Christmas. Because by the rules of fiction magic and chaos magic, that is absolutely applicable. And his experiences get very, very interesting. Very magic. And yeah, it was hard for me not to make this part of my Halloween every year too. There's a lot of weird subjects that come up in this thread. An interesting one is something called Halloween powder, which is a magical ingredient used by people doing Halloween magic. The original recipe is basically 1 part sugar, 1 part graveyard dirt. Very interesting mix. I made some myself last year, and it's a very interesting substance to work with. When I went back this Halloween to open it up, it definitely can't be described, well, shouldn't be described as powder anymore. I guess the graveyard dirt was a little more moist than I thought, and mixed with the sugar has become this dark, strange, syrupy substance that reminds me of something out of Twin Peaks. Dark pool before the trees, or the way that coffee slowly poured out of that cup in the Red Room. Very interesting, very strange substance. The recipes for it get progressively stranger throughout. The classic is working for me. Something else discussed in this opening paragraph are the applications of the cardinal monsters, here listed as Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, to the north, south, east, west that you address in your opening magical rituals, as I'm sure you all know. Now, for me personally, his lineup is very interesting. Let me see if that's in here. There it is. Calling the Quarters, with Dracula to the north as air, the Mummy to the south as earth, the Wolfman to the east as water, and Frankenstein's monster to the west as fire. It's a really interesting layout, and I did mine differently and wanted to show that right now. So, instead of doing the 4 directions, north, south, east, west, earth, air, fire, water, I do the 5 ancient elements. Well, in regards to the Halloween ritual. Air, earth, fire, water, spirit. Like in the 5th element, because how can you not include spirit once you've seen 5th element? So my layout is a little different than his. For Frankenstein, I have Frankenstein as earth. Because Frankenstein is made out of a whole bunch of dead people dug up from the grave. So he's very much of the earth, of the physical realm, uniting us in the most physical way. And all these monsters could go in a variety of places, because he's also animated by lightning. So you could put air in there as well. Or you could say, why isn't lightning included in one of the elements, making it a 6-star thing? It's just a thing. Don't worry about it. The air, earth, fire, water, spirit thing is just mood music. You can add or take away from it in any way you want to. I mainly went with this one because of my love of these 5 particular monsters. The first, of course, being Frankenstein's monster, or earth. Now, for water, I had the creature from the Black Lagoon, which is monster number 5, not included in the 4-monster lineup you saw in that old ancient article. In the ancient early 2000s. It feels like an ancient text. I love it. But yes, I chose creature from the Black Lagoon for water because he is the creature from the Black Lagoon and is obviously very watery. And he swims. I kind of feel like that one doesn't need explanation. For fire, I went with the Wolfman. The Wolfman's all about transformation. And fire is all about that too. Metaphor. I love that transformation. I can see why you would have him underwater in that little thread because of how emotional he is. These are all very emotional monsters. So yes, Wolfman for fire. For air, this was a tough decision. I was basically going between Mummy and Dracula for air and spirit. And ultimately, I went with the Mummy for air. Because the whole mummification, get a bunch of slaves to build your pyramid thing, blasting yourself up into the sky, but you got separate rooms for the king and queen, it's very air. Doesn't have that 5th element love to it, whereas, and obviously, Mummy was still quite interesting, but yes, whereas Dracula, who I'm using for spirits in this lineup, is all about love. Now, one thing about using these monsters, who I should note are the universal monsters, officially, is that they all have comedy versions of them. They've all hung out with, the cast of DuckTales. They've all hung out with Alvin and the Chipmunks. Abbott and Costello hang out with them. Their basic main activity is going to monster parties and getting funky. So that is part of what makes these guys very fun to work with. This isn't going for dark Halloween magic. This is going for fun Halloween magic. Halloween party magic. Halloween going out and having adventures like a kid magic. And that's why I have these guys rolling, the Universal Monsters. They've resonated with me. The part of that, of course, is because I went through a Universal Monsters phase when I was a kid, so you could easily substitute in any other monsters you want to over any other magical symbol. You know, different eras of Halloween horror movies you like. Yeah, this ancient thread inspired some very, very fun thinking. They mention a Halloween-themed tarot deck, which seems neat. Basically laying out your entire future and psychic framework in Halloween symbols. Comparisons of trick-or-treating to fairy raids was interesting and came up a lot. It's also interesting hearing about the concept of goblin energy. That resonates. There's goblin energy, pumpkin energy, different types of weird energy people are working with in these. Yes, something about goblin energy just out of resonance. I like this response here. It's not Halloween, but it's just worth mentioning. I once consecrated some chocolate-covered espresso beans to the funk in a similar manner, but that's a whole different story. And that's in response to Sobex. In his Call of the Horned Piper, Nigel Jackson gives a simple sort of Eucharist consecration for hallowing the bread and some milk of ale to the Fae. You could probably do it with candy, yes? So the rough draft was to incorporate this with a standard Massive Chaos B, as in Carol's Psychonaut. Then it is just a matter of tweaking it for aesthetics and intensity, and I incorporated some personal idiosyncratic touches. Yeah, goblin energy is something very interesting to think about. There's a lot of different types of goblins. My thoughts instantly go to labyrinth type funky goblins. There's a lot of different types. Where did I put this in next one? But yeah, the main thrust is definitely the workings with Jack Skellington, which are really fascinating. The feeling was so powerful that I almost considered charging a spontaneous working, but decided to stick with the original plan, which was the Skull Mask meditation. I wonder if he still has the Skull Mask. The first step toward a full-blown Pumpkin King invocation. I have this novelty candelabra with a glowing skull on top, more Mexican Day of the Dead than cartoony, which I use as a focus, kneeling, dragon pose if you prefer. I had my eyes open and fixed on the skull as I inhaled and then closed and focused on the altar image as I exhaled. I think on reflection that I may reverse that next time. And after several long minutes of this, I felt something stirring inside me, some hints of Jack Skellington. I found myself standing, arms outflung in a classic Jack pose. His eyes were still fixed on the glowing skull, and I gradually managed to flex the image from convex to concave, like I was looking into the hollow of the mask. I reached out for the mask and pulled the visualized astral mask over my face. Again, as with the vanishing, everything clicked perfectly, and I began spontaneously dancing, ending with a flourish of Jack's signature high-pitched laughter, which I have often tried to emulate and can never seem to do again. Could never seem to do right. I got it last night though. I was exhausted and a little off balance. This started out a quiet, reflective meditation, right? So I closed with another 4 monster banishing and relaxed. Some light pranayama. And a few rounds of Sama V2, for what it's worth. And he wanted to do 30 nights of this for this first Halloween work of this ritual. Here's an interesting one that I liked. This is regarding jack-o'-lanterns again. Their strange mythology. I ran a Halloween bash at my place last year, which was a good laugh. We conjured a dead spirit into a pumpkin lantern and chatted to her via Ouija board. A pumpkin lantern makes a pretty good temporary spirit house. You can conjure one of the partying spirits you take to the streets at Halloween into the lantern, offering them the pumpkin flesh, the energy of the candle, and some standard offerings like candy, shot glass of rum and whiskey, etc., which you also place in the pumpkin. It went well. It went quite well. The only thing is, Halloween is a bit mad and there's so much activity going on that it was hard to get much sense out of the spirits. They all seem to be off their tits at that time of year. Communication was a little like trying to have a rational conversation with someone mashed out of their head at 4 a.m. in a dance tent at Glastonbury. I had other ideas for Halloween-related magic that we didn't have time to do properly. For example, there's a divination system just waiting to be made out of the Dunkin' for Apples tradition, and there's the potential for baking sigilized cakes and to give to the kids who go trick-or-treating. Sigilized icing encoded the tense like former banner change world symbols. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things coming up in this. So I recommend finding the original, digging through all of it. I brought out some cool greatest hits, but there's a lot of weird stuff in there. Dropped one again. Tonight I'm going for the non-ancestral spirit stuff. On Halloween I make a pumpkin lantern. Temporary spirit house. The local spirits walk... Oh, I'm sorry. This was related to the jack-o'-lantern again. Apologies. This is Gypsy Lantern. Tonight I'm going for the non-ancestral spirit stuff. On Halloween I make a pumpkin lantern temporary spirit house. The local spirits walk abroad where they will tonight, so I honor that by preparing a pumpkin lantern carved out and filled with rum, smokes, and candy. A place for the spirits to drop in, have a drink, and something to eat as they do the rounds. Magically, it's a way of making good to the local spirits, both the dead and the natural spirits, fairies, land wights, whatever walks on Halloween. Introduce myself, make sure they know who I am, and know me as someone that raises a glass to them on their day. Also, good to be in good standing with local spirits of the area who will be operating over the coming year. Pumpkin House is a good way of making those nods without it being a big deal. Yeah, this is a really interesting theory of jack-o'-lanterns. I still go by the golem model, but I really like this and may consider doing it sometime. This is a really cool spell here. This magical technique is one of the cool ones. Definitely one of my favorite ones found in here. Here's a guy asking about scarecrow magic because scarecrows are awesome and should always be included. Another Jack Skellington working. As Jack, I oriented the working with yet another Bradbury reading. From the beginning of his story, Homecoming, about the October people, the eternal family rushing to the great gathering on Halloween, creeping, crawling, blowing on chill winds from all the dark corners of the world. I wanted the bells to act as a kind of call to the Halloween spirit within the listener. It was a lot of fun doing the reading as Jack. We read aloud with a storyteller's tone, gesturing with the text and miming as though performing to a surrounding audience. I charged the bells with energy from the Pumpkin King while chanting the mantra. Then things get a little more free form. And I just followed where the ritual led me, including taking the bells to the North Quarter and charging up their bewitching, mesmerizing qualities with the infamous Hand of Lugosi. You must be double-jointed in Hungarian, winky face. Jack had a few pronouncements of his own to make, calling them another branch of the Halloween tree, the Goblin Bells of Autumn. Halloween tree is a huge synchronicity for me. Anyways, and instructed them to gather my people from all corners. It was good ritual, and the bells feel edgy and exciting and good. I don't have any good way of objectively measuring their effect on others, but I have been told a couple times that they're very striking on the passion level. At least they're drawing attention, which is the first stage of their effect. That was 2 nights ago. Last night, I was dead tired again, and my resolve for working, blah blah blah. Okay. Yeah. That's his creation of his magic goblin bells, which are referenced again later. So much fascinating stuff in here. The idea was to combine a devotional ritual to the Pumpkin King with a sigil launch, using the energy and intensity of the worship, quote unquote, to charge the sigil, while also offering the sigil, both in magical intent and material base, as a sacrifice, which in turn generates more energy, which charges the sigil, making it a more powerful sacrifice, which, you get a picture. I was looking to make a kind of feedback loop, and while I'm not quite sure if the logic works out, the ritual seemed to go well. So I set up my orange and black candles, gave the goblin bells a ring, felt the air change immediately, and proclaimed an affirmation of my allegiance to the Pumpkin King. I did some breathing and visualization to gather the particular flavor of energy I needed, pumpkin energy, in the form of a glowing orange mist that I took in with every inhalation. I really like the glowing orange mist visual. That a lot. As I absorbed and radiated pumpkin energy, I started to push outward and charge my workspace, drawing further on the Halloween energy normally stored in the room, my living room, which is typically plastered with Halloween decorations and death heads and Universal Monster action figures, etc., and the surrounding area. This energy took on the image of a spiraling column of bats whirling and rustling around me, reaching far up into the sky and generating yet more energy with the ceaseless motion. The visualization was intense, and my body started swaying from the wind. The column of bats, or bat energy, is definitely a very interesting energy visualization to work with. If you're looking for a really good visual representation of this, play any of the Batman Arkham Knight games, Arkham Asylum games. Then I tried, with some success, to divide my attention between maintaining the bat column and inscribing the sigil. I used my pumpkin carving tools to carve it into the pumpkin, make the athame fit the job. Then I hollowed out the pumpkin and stuffed it with the candy corn. There's magic candy corn in this, by the way. Halloween candy, it's used for magic in here. They keep it real. Alright. I took the moment to admire the sigillated question mark, because he knows it's a ridiculous word. But I like it, actually. Sigillated pumpkin as an object, a thing of beauty with its own intrinsic value, an important aspect of any sacrificial object to my mind. I repeated the Pumpkin King affirmation over it, to dedicate it to Skellington Jack. I also ate some of the pumpkin meat to strengthen my body. I love that so much. To strengthen my body connection to the pumpkin as a sacrificial life form. I'm sorry to go weird voice on that. That's an awesome line. I couldn't help it. I turned my focus back to the bat column and got it building up and up and up and up and up. Pardon my Susing. Until it was time to push and guide the energy down through my hand into the sacrificial pumpkin, visualizing the light streaming out through the cut sigil and thoroughly infusing it. At this point, unbidden, I received the startlingly vivid impression of Jack towering over the whirling pillar of bat and reaching his own hand down through mine to lay his own seal on both sigil and sacrifice. I had no fear, just a touch of awe at the sense of presence. Ukoma, Tefigu Nosa Lehitu Roba. an excerpt from the Pumpkin King affirmation. Essentially, I bear the blessing of the Pumpkin King. And I'm going to read that again. Ukoma, Pefigu, Nosa, Lehitu, Roba. It was very different than the internalized invocation I had done with the skull mask and carried a much greater sense of Jack acting as he willed, independent of my consciousness. When I had charged the pumpkin what seemed to be enough, I concluded the rite by blowing out the candles and ringing the goblin bells one final time in the dark. I didn't banish though. I still needed to launch the sigil. It was primed, now needed to be fired, so to speak. So I asked Jack to stay with me, and I took the streets. Outside, I took a moment to breathe in a little fortifying energy from the nearly full moon. Walked out to a less inhabited, more dimly lit stretch of semi-rural road. There are, believe it or not, no handy crossroads near my house. Just a long stretch of straight road with side streets staggered instead of crossing. I took one last moment to contemplate the moon, then called out, "In the name of the Pumpkin King," smashed my sacrifice sigil to the street, where it exploded with a satisfying thunk and spray of candy corn. I'm not sure what it means that I can do these things without feeling silly, he says. There was a sudden sense of release and lightning. The night seemed to open and free, and I walked home zinging, like after playing a show, and in no mood to sleep. I was up till 5 and left work at 8. So that was last night. I've got some things to think about, my relationship with the Bone Daddy. And here's an interesting line that comes after it. Meanwhile, I'm finding the whole werewolf thing so interesting, I may go ahead and start a separate thread about it soon. Good haunting. And that's why you gotta go track down this thread. And there'll be links beneath this video. Because there are some pretty thorough instructions in here on how to work with Jack Skellington. A character who resonates with a whole lot of people. And I'm going to mention this one here because of a personal synchronicity, and also just because it's amazing. I did my first explicitly Halloween-oriented dream on Sunday morning. Or I did have my first explicitly Halloween-oriented dream on Sunday morning. A Burton-esque Halloween town that existed, at least partially underground, in a semi-wooded area. The detail that sticks out most are these jack-o'-lanterns on stakes which guard the borders and snare the unwary with sticky strands of spiderweb which shoot from their mouths. I knew at the time that I was supposed to be returning to the Halloween town type place, but I lingered too long and the pumpkin things nabbed me to speed things up. Once so nabbed, I was pulled into a swirling gray vortex that pulled me down into wherever it was I ended up. I know that I wasn't scared, I knew what to expect, but when I saw that they were going to get me, I braced myself for the vertiginous journey. I have no idea what relation I bore to this place, except that I was somehow supposed to be doing something to do with it. It's all vague and hazy in memory. I have a personal synchronicity with this, so I had to note it. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get my head around another post, ghosts and other things that go bump in the night. And this is one of the most interesting observations that I noticed from him reading, or that he notes after his working with Jack Skellington. I thought this was really fascinating. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get my head around another post, ghosts and other things that go bump in the night, as viewed within the Halloween paradigm, and contrasted with beliefs about the dead, particular ancestor reverence, another important practice in my life. More on that when I'm feeling more coherent. I'll just kick it off with a somewhat relevant observation. It seems that despite his skull head, Jack is not a death god, or even a god of the dead. He is the god of haunting itself, taken as a sacred domain and discipline. He wishes to be quite clear on that point, so far as I can tell from my work with him. That is an incredibly fascinating observation, especially from a working that started with fiction magic. This is a very interesting observation. The god of haunting itself. One of the things discussed throughout these many threads is the idea of haunting and spooking as their own separate domains, their own energies to be worked with. Jack is not a death god, nor even a god of the dead. He is a god of haunting itself, taken as a sacred domain and discipline. He wishes to be quite clear on that point. Jack Skellington fans, you need to get on this. And Halloween fans in general. Talks a little about how this Halloween energy comes up after Halloween too. I thought this was an interesting quote where he basically describes some pumpkin-y Jack Skellington synchronicities at Christmas time. Finding a Halloween candy bag and then tripping over a pumpkin. Followed by the unmistakable sense of Jack's presence. So he actually encounters him several times throughout the year. The working comes along for him. So fascinating. And then this was interesting. Another one of the writers in this thread talks about doing a Halloween party, just going full Egyptian with his magic. I thought that was an interesting choice. I'm embarking on a grand scheme to dress the house as a mummy's tomb, Egyptian hieroglyphics, columns, possibly a maze if I can get industrious enough. Papier-mâché statue of Bast to be the guests. All Halloween fans need to get on this. A quick little synchronicity for any Chiliad Mystery fans reading this. See you on the other side. That jumped at me. This observation from a user named Bobos, who wrote a lot on the old site, noted that Halloween festivities are fancy dress, booze, and magic mushrooms all wrapped up in a big party. If you want a way to sum up all Halloween magic in just one sentence, that's a pretty good way to do it. That's a pretty good technique to go with. Oh, that was an interesting one to note. Doing Halloween magic straight for the purpose of raising more Halloween fun. That's the interesting thing about all this Halloween magic. Usually magic is done with a very clear intent as part of it. This keeps turning towards shamanism. These become spiritual interactions rather than compartmentalized spells for a specific purpose. The guy Shropron doing magic with Jack Skellington, he is into it. He's getting groovy with it. And I highly recommend all other people, whether you be Halloween fan, Chaos Magician, or Nightmare Before Christmas fan, this is a fun energy to work with. One thing that I noticed when I was going back to look through all of this quote here. November also saw me start out on an eco-anarchy trip, which has branched into a growing interest in self-sufficiency, small plot gardening, and plant spirits. while also tying back into the root work and the werewolfism and the anti-authoritarian potential of each. And my spiritual religious identity is humming with activity as well. A new thread is coming, which ties back again to each of these areas. Yes, it's a time of serious syncretism in Halloween Town. That really resonated with me because of how I spent last Halloween, or part of last Halloween. Well, yeah, how I spent last Halloween, which was doing magic, largely inspired by this, but pushed towards political ends. I started something called Green Halloween, a magical concept I was trying to push like I was hyping up a rock festival. The Green Halloween. I got pretty weird with it as well. And while I didn't get my main intent didn't quite come true, or didn't come true, it very quickly stopped being about that, and like these other guys back in the old thread, these other magicians, and I say guys, both genders were getting groovy in there. Barbelith was great for every type of magician you can think of. Yeah, I tried, like those people, it started becoming more about shamanism and green energy mixed with revolutionary energy. I got very invisibles with it, too. Specifically involving the concept of fiction suits. Taking off your fiction suit, putting on a better fiction suit. Becoming a new person because the people we are, when we're not in costume, are just going along with the system. I put forth Green Halloween as basically a big magic spell. And while it's still in process, I got some very strange stuff out of it, particularly a lot of synchronicities leading to what he was talking about, eco-anarchy and plant gods, those two mixing together. Who will you be this Halloween? The Invisibles need to reactivate. Whatever green energy I was conjuring, there were some other people conjuring a different green energy who had way more numbers behind them this election. If you're a magician, you probably know who I mean. But yes. Every Halloween, until there's a green in the White House, every Halloween until the revolution takes the White House, is going to be Green Halloween. Plant God synchronicities became very strong. And yeah, the magic was done with the intent of getting Jill Stein in the White House. And that's still the intent. So we need a revolutionary in the White House, and the Invisibles need to reactivate and make it happen. Green Halloween is about putting on costumes, becoming new people, communing with weird green energies, changing reality. Fiction magic mixed with ancient magic. I was very inspired by the ancient Barbelith Halloween threads. My love of the Invisibles. My love of chaos magic and the need to get this revolution on. How will you be spending your next Halloween? The Invisibles have been reactivated. Praise to Jack Skellington. God of Halloween, King of Pumpkins, Mayor of Halloween Town. Happy Halloween to all of you. Video Game Vision Quest. The Invisibles are back. Peace.